Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video we're kind of going to be looking at how to make pads like Bicep. So a previous video I did, which you may have seen, kind of tried to cover their entire sound and all the different elements that go into their music, but this one's kind of going to be like a bit more focused and go into depth on how to kind of try to emulate their pads, which they obviously create a lot using hardware, but you can get a pretty similar result using plugins. So this video is kind of going to cover kind of everything you need to know about creating kind of those warm, emotional, moving pads like Bicep from scratch. So we're going to go into how to kind of program the chords or choose the chords, how to choose synth patches and program the synth patches, which would be layered. So we're going to go into layering and then finish off with a bit of processing. Firstly is to do with the chords. So typically your chord patterns are like 4-bar, like your standard 4-bar chords, and the thing that kind of makes them move a bit more is that they're minor. Like that kind of gives that feeling that you get when you listen to their music. So a lot of the time you can find, if you're like quite familiar with chords, you can program these 4 bar sequences that just like move you. And for inspiration of those, you can go to Chordify. I think it's Chordify, which basically, and you can basically look at their songs and see what chord patterns they've used. So for this one, I'll just go to the, also bump this up. I've done it in C minor. Oh no, this is in E minor. This is, you'll probably recognize, it's kind of the same chords as glue. So it's in E, G, and instead of like your standard chord, which would be up here, so you've got the E, G, and B. The top note has been put down from each chord. And it makes a considerable difference. So because it's got a different, like, the note at the top is kind of like your leading note. And then that's like your standard, and then a common trick is playing the root note of the chord and putting it an octave lower. So that's kind of what I've done. I've got E minor, yeah. E, D, F sharp. So I've got that kind of 4-bar pattern. So I've looked up the chords on Chordify. A quick trick you can use is in the pack, in the Sounds Like Bicep pack that I dropped. You can go to these you can go to these loops, and this, you'll notice it's the same. And you can convert harmony to new MIDI. You can kind of do this with any like similar style for Bicep. Like if you see, like, if you find a track which sounds like it might have heavily influenced their sound, you can go in and take the chords of like old records and stuff. And if you hear this, and you delete all like the kind of bump notes, as I refer to them, and put them in time, you've basically got the same chords. With a few wrong notes that you'd have to go in and use your ear to change. But that's one way of generating the chords. And that's kind of how I go about it. There's not really a set way. But obviously, like, it kind of comes with practice, like learning what sounds good and stuff. But that's kind of the chords, and how I would get started. So I've gone over the chords. Next is probably the instrument itself. So I think a key part of their sound and why it sounds so big is the layering aspect, which obviously comes from multiple sounds that fit well together. So one common synth that I know they have is the Juno. So this by Roland Cloud. So it's not, see, a lot of this programming is that I do is just you finding the presets and then tweaking them. So if you're expecting purely from scratch, you're in the wrong place. So I found this preset called Warmer Pad. And then in terms of like tweaking, a lot of the tweaks I make are to do with levels, EQing, which you can either do by adding an EQ in here, or kind of by trimming the cutoff, altering the resonance, and then the ADSR. So on every kind of layer, I would kind of do the same thing. I'd find a preset that worked, and then I'd tweak it so it fit. So I just continually add. So it's additive synthesis. And I'd always go to like add presets just because that's what I'm looking for. So this seems a bit too bright. So I'd kind of trim it so it's in the lower region. So it's all to taste, really. Attack. You want it rising slower. So yeah, that's kind of the tweaks I'd make. And then for like specific, you can do this with any plugins really. I've just chosen plugins that are similar to the ones they have in their studio. So the Korg Monopoly Jupiter, the Poly 800, and then Diva's just an additional one. You can do this with any synth. So with parameters, I'd want to maybe tweak in progress. I'd map them. So the frequency, the resolution, and the attack, decay, release of either envelope in this plugin's case. We'll just stick with frequency for now. Next, adding. So you can see that doesn't work. So you might want, with like plugins, so the monopoly is one they commonly use in their music. So when you're looking for like patches, you don't have to look for purely pad, and I wouldn't recommend it because it's if you use 5 layers or even 3 layers and you've got 3 pads, because it's an instrument rack, it's gonna sound very muddy, and that's not really what you want. So because you're using a rack, you want sounds that complement each other using the same MIDI pattern. If you were gonna go for multiple pads, you'd probably have them on different MIDI channels so that you can get rid of notes from one, so get rid of like the bass for one and have just a single line for like a string or something. So that's like all to do with layering and stuff, which we're kind of doing but on one channel. So I'll single this for now. That kind of sounds horrible. That sounds like it could work. I'll go for like a single lead patch later. Obviously, I'm not going into an incredible depth looking for patches because I wouldn't want the video to be purely that. Just get EQ the monopoly. This is the thing with these pad samples is they can take up a lot of space and it can get muddy quite quickly if you're not careful, so I tried to clean the EQ as one of the first things I do, just to fit the sound into the space. So something I'd almost be tempted to do is, you don't want, because you're using all these layers in the one MIDI clip, you don't want them all to be at the same octave unless you can find sounds that work. So one thing I would do is experiment with pitching. Which gives you a much larger chord than the 4 that we've already done. The 4 notes. So this is just okay. So I like that layer, so I'm just gonna move on to the third one. So this is another preset I found, which is really nice. Could experiment with other ones. Kind of like a choir. I like it how it is, so I'll add it. So you'll hear they're all kind of adding their own unique touch to the overall sound. And that's like the beauty of layering, if done correctly. This one, you will have seen, if you've seen the previous video, me talking about this plugin. Let me just close these because it's getting messy. You will see me talk about this. It's kind of like an old school sampler. Like the samples in it aren't the best quality, but combined with others work really well. So if I just, oh yeah, this is how you, the thing with using all these plugins is you forget how to use them, but so if I just find a patch, it's like an old chorusy piano. Which works, so we'll use it. I don't like spend a lot of time fretting over like the potential sounds. Like if they could work, I'll try and make them work rather than wasting time flicking. And then finally, add some diva. Like I want a really thick pad sample. Some of these sound horrible. Just trying to find. I might hang on. Pitch this one up. Okay, so that's kind of a wrap on the programming side, and we've kind of touched a bit on layering, but I'm just gonna try and sort the levels a bit more before I move on to effects. what I want is yeah, that works. I was basically wanting to see on the EQ that the spectrum is filled a lot more. Obviously I don't want it much in the low end, so that's kind of one of the things I'll do first in the effect process, as you can see in this chain. In fact, we'll just use this chain, but we'll go through it. So firstly, I'll do some EQ to tidy it up. Creates the effect that you will have seen briefly touched on at the end of last tutorial, and I think it's one that I'll do a separate one on, probably using this same kind of sample. So I will turn this on as well. At the end of the chain, this will clean up whatever space we create in the effect rack, or if you don't have that plugin, whatever space you create using like reverbs and delays and modulation effects. Compressor to even out the dynamics, because although we've layered it here to the best of our ability, we want some consistency in the sounds. Otherwise they'll go off on their own tangent, which is nice, I guess. But so the final bit of processing is what I like to use the effect rack for. So although you don't have this plugin, you can still kind of do the same things. So you're basically looking, get creative, go for like spectral effects, so effects which make the sound large, big, like reverb and delay. Effects which kind of make the pads kind of more interesting, like modulation. So like phaser in this example. So this has got a phaser and a delay in this. And if I wanted to add maybe a reverb, so you're making the sound big and then you're tidying it up and then you're compressing it. The order of these could be switched. But in terms of general processing chain, clean it up, apply effects, creative effects to it, so your modulations, your space, clean that up, and then compress, or switch these around. I don't think it makes much difference personally, but with this, you're potentially compressing muddy sound, so we'll put it back. And then finally, just to show it in use, but like I said, we'll touch on it in the next one. the gate's basically doing the rhythmic transgate effect, which is making it a lot more choppy. It's kind of like a ducking effect, just to summarize it, but we'll go into that in a bit more detail in the next one. So yeah, that's kind of a wrap on how I would create pads, like those emotional, moving, warm, however you'd like to describe them, pads like Bicep. Obviously, the best way would be going out and buying all the synths they have in their studio, but that's not realistically feasible. So you can still come pretty close with software emulations, and this could even be a lot more simple, like 3 layers worth of pads. But hopefully this video has kind of given you an overview on like chords, how to program them, or where to seek inspiration for the types of patterns you're looking for. And programming / choosing synths to use. These are good examples, but you're open to most. Kind of like how you'd layer. So maybe you'd find 1 or 2 pad patches, and maybe you'd layer it with like a sound like we've done in Fury, which is in this case a piano, but maybe like a string. How you'd alter these patches to kind of mold into one sound, and then finally how you'd kind of consider processing them to make the sounds bigger and filling the spectrum and that kind of thing. So yeah, enough of my waffle. Hope you enjoyed. As a reminder, you can grab all the resources, including project files in their style and sample packs in their style. See all previous resources on this artist on the link below. If you liked, remember to like, leave a comment if you found it useful, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.